Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I appreciate you getting on this webinar. I'm sure we'll have others joining as we're going along, but I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. I'd like to introduce Solomon Wheeler. He is with the U.S. SBA office and the Eastern Pennsylvania office in Harrisburg. He is here to talk about financial stuff, about EIDLs and PPPs and all different good stuff.
Yes.
If you have questions, please use the chat feature, but I know that Solomon is going to be stopping in between so that you can ask some questions live too. And with that, I will turn this over to you.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Solomon Wheeler, and I'm the Harrisburg branch manager for the SBA. Certainly on behalf of SBA, I want to thank you for taking time to learn a little bit more about the Economic Aid Act. I am joined by some colleagues, SBA colleagues. I believe James Verbeck is on the line and Shannon DeGilio. They'll be helping to field questions in the chat also. And I believe Shannon may also tell you a little bit more about the Shuttered Venues Operators Grant and the SBA Debt Relief Program. So everything that we talk about over the next 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes or so, you can get this information on sba.gov/PPP. Any discrepancies in this presentation, keep in mind that, the official guidance will govern. And I just encourage everyone to, look at the sba.gov/PPP website. There's lots of great information out there. So the SBA's mission is to start, to help Americans start and grow businesses. We've been very involved with the PPP and EIDL programs and all the other programs to help, small businesses recover. One of the things that we've engaged with are all of our SBA resource partners, whether it be the 15 small business.
Uh-oh, you froze.
Solomon, you froze up. Can you hear us?
Uh-oh.
Okay, well, yeah, until Solomon gets back on, I can pick up. We've all been doing this presentation several times for several different organizations. And I'm Solomon's colleague, Shannon DeGilio, and I work in the Northeast Pennsylvania area. So whereas Solomon covers the Harrisburg area and areas west of that, I'm just Northeast PA. So we do pretty much the same thing. So I think where Solomon left off, where he was just letting you know that we have a lot of different resource partners that are available throughout our network that are able to assist you with PPP and with EIDL assistance. So a lot of the information that we go over today is really confusing, and there's a lot of what ifs and what are the best, programs for me, and we can certainly help you make those decisions. But our resource partners are there and standing by and ready to assist you with any questions that you may have as well.
Yep, sorry about that. Had some technical problems. Shannon, you want to continue, and we'll just flip it around. I'll do the Shuttered Venues.
Okay, that works. I might get kicked off next, so you never know. Okay, so the first program that we offer is the EIDL program, and we don't really spend a lot of time on this because EIDL's been around for a while now, but the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is a program that the SBA has available for businesses that have experienced losses due to the pandemic. So that program is available. It is a loan, and you can apply for it if you have not already through our website. And we do EIDL loans for small businesses, including agricultural and aquacultural businesses. And this is the only time where we do lending to nonprofits. And we will also do loans to sole proprietors, independent contractors, and owners of rental property under this program. So the program does go up to where you could receive a loan amount of up to $2 million. But right now, there's an asterisk there because the program was recently capped at $150,000 per borrower because of the funding appropriations and the, there was just such a high demand for the EIDL loan that we decided, well, I didn't, but SBA decided to cap that loan at 150. And so that could change depending on demand. But basically, this loan is 3.75% fixed for small businesses for profit, and for nonprofit 2.75%. And the loan term could go up to 30 years, and there's no penalty or prepayment penalty for that. So this program is meant to cover the working capital losses that the business has experienced. So it's really not meant to do anything else, to replace lost sales or to expand, to move into a different building or space. It's mainly there to pay your fixed debts that you would have been able to pay had the pandemic not occurred, your payroll, accounts payable, and other bills that basically you would have been able to pay if COVID didn't happen. There's really no collateral requirements unless your loan amount is over $25,000. Then the SBA will look to see if there's any available collateral. And what they'll do is put a blanket UCC-1 filing on any collateral that you own. So that could be any kind of personal assets, business assets, and so forth. All right, and also it's good to know that you can still have a PPP loan and an EIDL loan. Just the purposes of the loan amount cannot be the same. Okay, so if you want to apply, you can go to this link here. There's also the 800 number and the mailbox that you can send into on SBA.gov. And if you have any questions, you'll talk to somebody directly from the Office of Disaster Assistance, which is a separate entity, well, not an entity, a separate department of the SBA. And I wouldn't recommend mailing in your application, but if you want to, go ahead. That's the address to mail it in, but the preferred method is to submit your application online. Okay, so now one good thing that has happened out of the new legislation that came out is that the EIDL advance deduction has been repealed. So for those of you who had received an EIDL advance, which an EIDL advance was an amount of money that a borrower received in the very beginning of this pandemic when we started taking applications, and that was money that was supposed to not have been paid back. But the way that the CARES Act legislation was written, it said that if you received a PPP loan, that when you applied for forgiveness, that whatever amount of the EIDL advance amount that you received would be deducted from your forgiveness amount. So in other words, you would have to pay it back. So if basically borrowers were receiving forgiveness amounts less whatever the EIDL advance was, and they were left with a remaining balance on their PPP loan. The Economic Aid Act has repealed that. So for borrowers who have received PPP forgiveness already, they will not have to, you'll see all of that will be fixed and corrected by the SBA. So it's just a matter of waiting now and making sure that, everything will be reconciled. So you will not have to pay that balance anymore. All right, then with the act came out the targeted EIDL advance. So with this round of funding, there will be advance funds available up to $10,000, but they this time around will be very targeted to who will be able to receive that EIDL advance. So the targeted EIDL advance is providing advance into businesses that are in low income communities and who previously received an EIDL advance for less than $10,000, or those who applied but received no funds due to a lack of available program funding. So what we will, you don't have to do anything at this time because this program has not rolled out yet. So to know if you're eligible, if you're going to receive a targeted EIDL advance, the SBA is going to reach out to you directly and let you know if you're eligible. So at this time, nothing is needed to be done. If you're eligible, you will be notified. Okay, so also we just kind of discussed this, but you may qualify for the targeted EIDL advance if you're located in a low-income community. And then, you know, we go off of the defined definition of low-income community in Section 45D of the Internal Revenue Code. So you have to be located in a low-income community in order to qualify. We're going to put additional details on our website. So this would be the page that you would want to go to check and make sure for any updates. They will be posted here to sba.gov/coronavirus relief. And you have to demonstrate that there's been more than a 30% reduction in revenue during the 8-week period beginning on March 2nd, 2020 or later. So if you meet the low income community criteria, you'll also be asked to provide gross monthly revenue, all forms of combined monthly earnings received, such as profits or salaries, to confirm the 30% reduction. Okay, and I think we talked about most of this. Okay, and this is just talking about for those who applied for EIDL assistance, but the funding ran out on before December 27th. So if you didn't receive an EIDL advance due to lack of program funding, you will be notified through the SBA again, and you'll be asked to submit documentation. And you, as long as your business has less than 300 employees, then you'll be contacted by the SBA to prove eligibility and to possibly receive an EIDL advance that way. Agricultural enterprises are not eligible, and you may be asked to provide an IRS Form 4506T to allow us to request your tax returns on your behalf. Okay. Okay. And is this you, Solomon?
Okay, so looks like we skipped a few slides, but I'll go through it anyway.
Did we?
Yeah, let's, where's
PPP? Let me see if I just, hold on one second. Make sure I have the right one. I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen for a second. Yeah, did we skip PPP? I mean, that was, what, hold on one second. Would this be the one? Oh, okay. I think I had another version pulled up. Okay, are there any questions up until this point? Anything that we went over?
So far, so good. I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I think this is where we're at. Yeah, I thought we went through that a little too fast, Solomon.
Yep, that's where we PPP first draw.
Oh, what a day. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program first draw updates. Okay, so with this PPP rollout, this is for people who have not received a PPP loan yet. All right, and the initial launch of the PPP was originally put out just to community financial institutions, but now it's open to everybody. Now, the SBA lender match will direct borrower inquiries to these mission-based lenders if you are interested in working with any of them. So lender match is located on our website at sba.gov. And right on our homepage, you can click on lender match if you are having issues finding a lender to work with, or are interested in working with one of the community financial institutions. Okay, so borrowers can apply for a PPP loan up until March 31st, 2021. Now, all PPP participating lenders may include SBA 7A lenders. They could be credit unions, eligible non-bank lenders. So if you wanted to see a list of eligible lenders, you could click on them in the link here in the slideshow to see all of the participating PPP lenders. So small businesses together with their affiliates that have 500 and fewer employees are eligible for the PPP. So this includes sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed persons, and 501c3 and 501c19 organizations. We've also included in this news organizations are now eligible for this as well. Newly also housing cooperatives are eligible. They were not eligible in the first round under the CARES Act. 501c6 organizations and marketing destination organizations with no more than 300 employees are now eligible. Entities with no more than 500 employees in the accommodation and food sector are eligible for this. So one thing to note is that it's a maximum of 300 employees for the first draw for food service, and then it goes down to, but it's 300 employees for every other type of business. Now, if you're going into a second draw, the eligibility changes to 300 employees, but for first round, it will stay at 500 for the food service sector. You must be considered small by size standards. So if you have a question about that, we can chat about whether you're small or not. And you want to complete your application on the SBA form 2483. Now, you might get confused if you go onto our website and download the application. There is a second draw one, which will say SD after it for second draw. So make sure you fill out the first draw application and not the second one. And for this time, they have expanded some of the use of proceeds of which you can use the PPP funds for. So you still have to use at least 60% of your funds for payroll, but and before you were able to use up to 40% for mortgage, interest, rent, and utilities. But now you can also use up to 40% to include your worker protection costs related to COVID-19, your uninsured property damage costs caused by looting or vandalism during 2020, and certain supplier costs and operation expenditures. And then another change that has happened is that before your covered period, you had to select if you wanted to use the money within 8 weeks or 24 weeks. And now you have the option to expend all of your funds between 8 weeks and 24 weeks. So you don't have to, you can select what kind of covered period you want to expend those funds anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks. Okay. So that covered the first draw. And again, that was for borrowers who have not yet received a Paycheck Protection loan. That would be for their first draw. So for second draw applicants, there's a little bit more that you have to prove in order to obtain a second draw. So as where the first draw was just very open, there was not a lot of requirements. As long as you met basic eligibility, you would be eligible for a first draw. For a second draw PPP loan, you have to show that you have a documented reduction in at least 25% of gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. So we're looking at calendar year quarters here. So you need to choose, which, if you're looking at quarter 1, quarter 2, and whatever the look back is between what you had in 2019 and 2020, needs to show a 25% reduction in gross receipts in order to be eligible for the second draw of PPP. Okay, so if you notice that the maximum term on the first one was 10 million, now the maximum is 2 million. And again, it's capped at 300 employees or less. Basically, again, you want to apply on the 2483 SD for second draw, or just contact your lender and they may have you fill out an application maybe through their online system. Okay, so the loan amount calculation is going to be different depending on the different entity type that you have. But for general businesses, you are looking at 2.5 times the average monthly payroll costs for either 2019 or 2020. And then for food services, if you have a NAICS code of 72, you will receive 3.5 times the average monthly 2019 or 2020 payroll costs. So you can either elect to use your 2019 or your 2020 payroll costs. And since the food services sector was one of the industries that was the hardest hit, the economic aid bill allowed those businesses whose primary business is in food service to take advantage of 3.5 times of payroll instead of, and everyone else will get 2.5. Okay, so then as we move into forgiveness, again, we will not be deducting those idle advances from PPP forgiveness. The Economic Aid Act changed that, so you will not have to worry if you received an advance or PPP forgiveness. Forgiven loans are not taxable income. So that was another big question that, you know, would this have to be, would any loan that you received and received forgiveness for, would it have to be included as income? And it does not. Expenses paid with PPP loans are now tax deductible. You will want to consult the IRS or your CPA just to ensure that you are calculating all of those things correctly. Loan proceeds are spent on payroll costs and eligible expenses. And then at least 60% of the proceeds are spent on payroll costs in order to receive full forgiveness. Okay, employee and compensation levels are maintained, so you have to maintain your FTE levels. You know, and again, there were some safe harbors that were included as to whether, you know, if you had employees that, you know, you laid off and you tried to bring them back and they didn't return. You know, there's just ways that you have to document that to make sure that you're not penalized for reducing more than 25% of your staff. And then SBA is developing a simplified forgiveness application for loans that are under $150,000. So that is still that's still up in the air. So if you know you haven't applied for forgiveness yet and your loan is under $150,000, you might just want to stay tuned for that. Sorry about my dog, Rocky. Sorry. You know, again, the maximum loan amount on the first draw is 10 million and 2 million on the second draw. The interest rate is 1%. So if there are any amounts that are not forgiven, you essentially have a loan that is at a 1% fixed interest rate that will have to be paid back by the maturity of 5 years from them. The first payment is deferred to the date that the SBA remits the forgiveness amount to the borrower's lender, or 10 months after the end of the borrower's loan forgiveness covered period if the borrower does not apply for loan forgiveness. So, you know, if you decide not to apply for forgiveness, you're just waiting. After your covered period, you have 10 months after that of deferment. Hey, there's no collateral requirements for the PPP, no personal guarantees are required. There's no borrower or lender fees that are payable. And again, you have up until March 31st currently, as the law says, to apply for a PPP loan. Okay, now it's your turn, Solomon.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks for stepping in and saving me. For whatever reason, I got kicked off. So let me just break right there. Are there any questions about what Shannon just covered? You can go ahead and unmute yourself and just ask the question. We'll keep this real informal. No, I don't see any questions in the chat. Okay, so we'll keep moving here. So one of the new programs that we're really excited about is called the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. This is really COVID funding relief for all of those performing arts organizations that have been really tremendously impacted, negatively impacted by COVID. Let's go to the next slide. So first thing off, SBA is not accepting shuttered venues operators grant applications yet, but we're hoping to get some good news, in the next couple of days. Essentially, this is basically about $15 billion in grants that'll be available to applicants who meet the eligibility requirements and have been affected by the COVID pandemic. It's likely to be administered by the SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance. So presumably there'll be a online portal in which an application can be submitted. The eligible applicants, they may qualify for grants equal to 45% of gross earned revenue, or a maximum single grant award up to 10 million. So if a venue is doing, $1 million in gross earned revenue per year, they'll be eligible for a grant up to 450,000. So these grants could be a significant impact to these venues. And then finally, at least about $2 billion of the total program really will be reserved for eligible small operators with up to 50 full-time employees. So it's good to see that, the programs are being directed and the criteria is narrowed so that smaller organizations will benefit. Let's go to the next slide. So the eligible applicants may include theatrical producers, museum operators, zoos and aquariums, motion picture theater operators, live performing arts, talent representatives, live venue operators, and then any subsidiaries of these organizations that also meet eligibility requirements. So again, a broad array of performing arts organizations that have been impacted are potentially eligible. And I did recently see, I believe it came out yesterday, a frequently asked question list about the types of entities and how you evaluate, whether or not you qualify. And much of it is tied to, number one, do you have fixed seating, right? Like a community theater would have seats that are bolted to the floor and have an auditorium with a stage. So much of the criteria to evaluate whether or not you fit into one of these buckets will be, about whether or not you have dedicated space, what's the percentage of revenue that's dedicated toward performing arts, etc. Let's go to the next slide. So SVOG, Shuttered Venues Operators Grant Requirements. Applicants must have been in operation as of February 29th, 2020. They must have not received a PPP loan on or after December 27th, 2020. However, a shuttered venue is not prohibited from applying for the grant if they've already have a COVID EIDL loan or plan to apply for one, or they've received a first draw PPP prior to December 27th, 2020. So if an organization fits into one of the categories, they've already received a first draw prior to December 27th, they could very well, certainly be eligible to apply for an SVOG grant. And the good news is that there's no impact on COVID if you want to apply for the grant. You can still apply for the COVID EIDL loan. Let's go to the next slide. So this slide just kind of helps you kind of think through the process with PPP, SVOG, and COVID. So PPP is used primarily to cover payroll costs, as Shannon mentioned earlier, payroll costs for employees rather than independent contractors. And it is a forgivable loan if certain standards and eligibility requirements are met. The Shuttered Venues grant, you have to prove your eligibility requirements are met, and it allows for broader use of funds. And oh, by the way, it does not need to be repaid. So that's a real plus. And then the COVID EIDL loan, which is a loan, it's used primarily to cover working capital. Had the pandemic not occurred, there is not a forgivable portion on the EIDL. You have to pay it back, but keep in mind that's being termed out over 30 years. So the payments are usually quite manageable, and we should say that the first 12 months of EIDL are also deferred. So that's another benefit. And then finally, applying for PPP after December 27th, 2020, or the SVO grant does not have any impact on your COVID EIDL eligibility. So again, that slide is really just to kind of help compare and contrast the three primary programs that we've been discussing. Next slide. So calculating SVOG funds, it depends on when the organization was in operation. So now if the venue was in operation on January 1, 2019, that seems like a lifetime ago, it's the lesser of an amount equal to 45% of 2019 gross earned revenue or 10 million. Obviously, if a venue qualifies for up to 10 million, they're significantly, a fairly large organization. But for most, they'll be looking at 45% of 2019 gross earned revenue. If they've been in operation after January 1, 2019, then it's the lesser of the average monthly gross revenue for each full month you're in operation during 2019 multiplied by 6 or 10 million. And I guess a simple way of saying that is really it's the average monthly gross revenue times 6. So the goal is to generate a loan that's about equivalent to 6 months of revenue. So that's really what the SBA is trying to get to in these calculations. Next slide, please. So this slide is a bit of an eye chart, but this is, the SBA is putting a process in place to essentially evaluate and ultimately fund these grant applications. They're not accepting applications yet, but we're hopeful that that'll begin to happen soon. You can look, if you look on the left-hand side with some of the blue print, first priority, second priority, third priority. Essentially, the SBA is going to try to triage the distribution of these grants and look at the first priority, which is entities that have suffered a 90% or greater revenue loss between April 2020 and December 2020. So these are venues that have been, devastated and are really kind of just hanging on. They'll be the first priority. They're going to try to get those funded quickly. The second priority are entities that suffered a 70% or greater revenue reduction between the same period, April 2020 and December 2020. That's when SBA has identified that period as the real heavy impact, negative impact to businesses. The third level or third priority are entities that suffered a 25% or greater revenue loss between, again, the same period, April 2020 and December 2020. So first, second, and third priority levels, it's really just a funding methodology, and that's what this slide is trying to communicate. Let's go to the next slide. What are the allowable use of funds? Again, these allowable use of funds has been broadened, right? So let's just go through them so that we can say that we took a look at them. Funds may be used for specific expenses, which include payroll expenses, rent payments, utility payments, scheduled mortgage payment, not including prepayment of principal, scheduled principal and interest, scheduled debt payments, not including prepayment of principal on any indebtedness incurred in the ordinary course of business prior to 2/15/20. What else? Worker protection expenditures, cleaning the office, sanitizing fluids, etc. Payments to independent contractors. There, in the other programs, there's restriction around independent contractors. But the point here is that, you can actually use the grant for payments to independent contractors, and that's capped at 100K. Per in annual compensation per contractor. Other ordinary and necessary business expenses, including maintenance, admin costs, state and local taxes and fees. So again, that's a plus. Operating leases in effect as of 2/15/20. Insurance payments, and even advertising, production, transportation, as long as, these can't be the primary use of funds from the grant, but certainly there's some eligibility there. So long list of allowable use of funds, and it reflects the desire for the SBA to really help these impacted venues. Let's go to the next slide. So the grantees may not use award funds to buy real estate. That makes sense. Make payments on loans originated after 2/15/20, make investments or loans, make contributions or other payments on behalf of political parties, political committees, etc., or any other use prohibited by the administrator. So those are areas in which those are big no-nos, right? Can't use the funding for those things. The grantee record keeping, it's important to keep good records always, but for this particular program, grantees will be required to maintain documentation demonstrating their compliance with the eligibility and other requirements of the grant. They must retain employment records for 4 years following their receipt of the grant, and retain all other records for 3 years. So 4 and 3 years are the thresholds for really maintaining records. Application and additional guidelines will be posted when available. And if you want more information, there's an email that's available, svogrant@sba.gov. Keep in mind, all emails regarding SVO grant will be sent using an official government email address ending in @sba.gov. So just something for awareness. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I should say there again, with the Shuttered Venues Grant Program, there is additional information online. Just keep an eye out for when the portal opens up. There's a frequently asked question document that's available online. And so before I just wrap up with SBA debt relief, are there any questions about the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant? Okay, we must be doing a great job with information. And if you think of something later, don't hesitate. You can always send us an email. Okay, so SBA debt relief. So in some cases, if you have a standard 7A, 504, or microloan, the SBA has stepped up and provided debt relief by paying the principal and interest on these loans as long as they're in current servicing status. This is all a part of the CARES Act, and SBA was authorized to pay basically 6 months of principal, interest, and any other associated fees for borrowers. So what we're seeing now through the Economic Aid Act, which authorized additional debt relief payments on, again, the standard 7A, 504 and microloan borrowers beyond the 6-month period prescribed in the CARES Act. So this is additional debt relief that's available. The level of assistance really varies based on when the loan was approved, and will begin on or after February 1, 2021. So if you're in that position where you could be potentially looking at SBA debt relief, we're asking that you just simply contact your lender for questions on availability of this particular type of assistance for your SBA loan. If you have any other follow-on questions, but really the debt relief, like I said, could vary from 3 months on up to even 9 months potentially. And then finally, the initiatives described above really are limited to the level of available funding. So, which is really just a way of saying, it's only available until the money runs out. So that's kind of something that's embedded in all of these programs. And let's see, is there any other information on this? I think that's about it. So this is our wrap-up slide. So, we really do appreciate you, like I said, taking the time to listen and understand more about these programs. We want to emphasize that, there's more detail that's available through the interim final rules, through FAQs, through some slides. And of course, these slides are available. And of course, our website, sba.gov/coronavirus relief. We encourage you to take a look at that website. We also encourage you to sign up for the SBA's emails at sba.gov/updates. And certainly you're welcome to follow us on Twitter at SBA_Eastern PA. Looks like our slide just disappeared. But the point is that there's lots of avenues in order to keep yourself informed. We certainly want to let you know that we're all available. Should anyone have any questions, my email is solomon.wheeler@sba.gov. It's available. Please don't be shy about using that. And I guess I'll pause right there and ask if there are any other additional questions or any questions based on the information we covered. Well, it's quiet out there.
Well, it's the end of the day. People are probably winding down.
It's been one of those days. It's been a long day.
Well, if we don't have any questions, we will be sending out a recording of this email, of this recording of this webinar, and we will include your email, Solomon,
Okay.
so that if people feel more comfortable asking questions on a one-to-one basis, they can reach out to you.
Okay, well, we hope the information was helpful, and like I said, we're all available, should you have any follow-up questions, and we do appreciate your time today, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you both. Thank you, Shannon, for jumping in, and thank you, Solomon, for putting this all together.
You
And thank
saved it
everybody
for
for
us.
joining us today. And I hope everybody has a safe rest of the day, and we'll get this out for you in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great
Take
day.
care.
Bye-bye.